and welcome to the Council of Dragons Season 2. I'm your host, Olivia Fahy, the editor of Geek Ireland, and joining me today as my hand of the Queen is actually the Master of Whispers himself, Andy McCarroll. How are you doing, Andy?
Not too bad, Olivia. How are you? I'm very happy with that intro now. I've gotten used. I've embraced my role in this kingdom now of yours.
Well, you were always the one that used to come to us with all the gossip, so, Master of Whispers, it just suits you.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be the king in your kingdom anytime soon. So yeah, I think that's the best I'm going to get.
I think my husband might have something to say about
Yes,
that.
very fair.
How have you enjoyed the first episode of House of the Dragon Season 2? Because I know you and I were massive fans of the first season.
I was a massive fan of the fourth season, but also the same thing happened to me. What happened for every season of Game of Thrones? If I'm not watching it consistently, I'll put it on, and I got about 15 minutes into the episode, and I was like, the Loki meme. I was like, I've never seen this person before in my life. So I had to go back to YouTube, watch a recap, and go, oh yeah, that's the thing with the oak and the dragon, the steps on the crab. Because so much happened in that fourth season that you just, oh yeah, that was the thing. Like you just remember the kind of the bullet points of it. And I was like, there was a whole thing about, the king of the crabs. I was like, she had completely forgotten about that. And it ended on such a cliffhanger that I think I'd blocked it out because I got so annoyed at the end of season one where I was like, I need the next episode right now. That was like, I just need to block this out, Men in Black pen myself. So when it comes up, I'll be just as excited again.
I know, and I think that even when we watched episode one again, I actually had to go back and watch it a second time because I was like, I think I've forgotten nearly everything that happened. Because as much as there was one major sort of moment in it, there was a lot that happened overall. Not to mention the fact that they've changed the intro. Like, can we just talk about that for a second, please? Because I wasn't expecting them to change it. I was still expecting the bloodline theme to be the same opening, but no, now we have actually this tapestry of the history of Valeria and the Targaryen legacy.
Yeah, and if anyone at home is wondering at what point my missus stopped watching it with me, it was about 40 seconds into the intro when I paused it and went, hang on, no, I need to see that's the lineage, that's Valeria, that was the home of the dragons, that's the one that she's I'm not watching this with you if she's gonna be pausing it every 2 minutes. So yeah, like you said, it kind of the history of the Targaryens, you see the volcano that killed the dragons. You see what's Aegon and the sister brides are in this, the burning of Harrenhal is in there as well. You see the star was the Stark that took the knee. Is that his name? The Stark that took the knee, or the Stark that
It is, yeah, the bent the knee,
bent the
and
knee. That's the one.
you have kind of like you sort of see like how they basically how they conquered Westeros, and then you get to see a few little snippets of how the legacy has gone on from there. You get to see Jaehaerys, where and they even show like there's like some coins to the side because he had
Mm.
like great wealth and prosperity. It was a time of peace, and then you have the when they named Viserys as his heir in Harrenhal in the ruins, and then you've got Aegon on one side and and Rhaenyra on
Yeah.
the other side. But I also loved how they had the black and the green hands to go with it. I thought that was a
Mm.
really, really cool touch. There was a couple of other different things in there that I thought were really interesting, and I was like, are they going to play out as it goes on? Because I thought there was actually a clue to the end of this episode in the intro, but it was way further on in the opening of like the Doom of Valeria kind of thing. So I don't think it was, but for a moment I was like, oh, is that a little clue as to what's going to happen later on? But I think, like with the Game of Thrones opening, it leaves this open to, more segments to be added to the tapestry. And actually there you know that there is a Game of Thrones tapestry up in Northern Ireland, yeah?
Oh yes, the tapestries. I'd
The,
love to
the
see
ta
the tapestries.
but the tapestry, it's amazing. It's actually really, really cool because there's even, the scene of what's the name? The Battle of uh Hard Home, is it?
Yes.
Whew, got pull that one out of the back of my head. There's like the scene that they've depicted in the tapestry of that. You can actually see Mastodon behind the Night King.
Oh wow.
And the reason I know it's Mastodon is because Brent Hines has a tattoo on his head, and they've actually stitched the tattoo into the into the picture of him. It's amazing, like the artistry that has gone into it. So I kind of like that this is now what the intro is. It's calling back to something that they have done with Game of Thrones, but it's still different. It's still House of the Dragons.
And it is, and it's still to go back to that kind of the confusion of it. There's the scene where you see who turned out to be Maegor the Cruel on the throne with his throat slit, and I was looking, going, is that Viserys? That's not what happened. And I'm kind of second guessing myself, going, did I remember this as a completely different show? Thankfully, it wasn't. It was something that happened years
Remind me
before.
actually, was he the one that had his throat slit by some attacker, or did he die by poking himself with one of the swords on the Iron Throne?
he
I
killed
can't
himself
remember Tom.
on the throne with the sword that was on it, and that's what kind of made me see it was like, what's the throne kills those who aren't worthy to sit on it, and that's what played into kind of the series, and that's why I was thinking, I was like, I remember him cutting himself on the throne, but he definitely didn't slit his own throat.
I had to laugh because then later on the episode you see Egon like literally like over the throne. He has no fear of slicing and dicing himself on that thing. It's hilarious.
It just looks like the most uncomfortable thing in the world, and certainly, like, a few drinks on you sliding around, absolutely not. There'll be bits of you getting sliced off left and right. There'd be no errors if anyway if I was sitting on that throne.
Well, do you know what? Considering Rhaenyra is out for blood this season, I don't think she would mind a few pieces being sliced off him.
No, definitely not. And again, like, you kind of like forget what she'd went through. Like the last episode, she lost her father, her son, her baby, and the crown in the space of about 15 minutes. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, no, I can see why she's got that you know, mean mugging on going.
I know, and I have to say, kudos to Emma Darcy. What a powerhouse performance, because when you think about it, they only had one actual line in the entire episode, but the power in the performance, the power in the quiet, and just the absolute heartbreak that was just etched across her face, sorry, their face, it was just, I thought it was spectacular.
Yeah, and I didn't actually realize that until you'd said it to me after I'd watched the episode. And I was thinking, no, because she had the scene with the son, and no, actually, she didn't say anything there. And there was so much where, like you said, she's able to convey with her face just, everything that's going on in our mind's eye. And I just think that the performance on that is, I think it's brilliantly cast. Like, everyone, we went through this before, like, everyone is just perfect. And it's the point where you're seeing the character, you're not seeing the actor. And I know a lot of them, this is kind of the main role, unless it's like people like Paddy Considine and Matt Smith, but you just see them in the role, not, you see the character, sorry, you don't see the actor behind it.
I think it's so important, especially for things like a massive sort of character driven story, because you need to be able to connect with them. And as much as I've said that, I do think Matt Smith has been doing a phenomenal job, because I think this is, well, aside from dare we mention Morbius, um aside
Even
from
then,
it,
he was in the Morbius film I wanted to see. Like, he was playing it exactly. Like, yeah, whatever Matt Smith thought he was making, that's the film I want to see.
in fairness, yeah, he was the best thing in that. But I think this is the most villainous that we've kind of seen him. And even then, he's not like an outright villain. He's still a relatively good guy. Um, but you're kind of seeing now in the first episode, they did it so cleverly. Like right off the bat, his first scene is him trying to lay the law because Rhaenyra has gone off on the dragon grieving. And Rhaenys was just like, "Has the queen ordered this?" And he was just like, "Well, I am the king." And she was like, "Yeah, but she's actually the queen." And you can kind of see this almost power dynamic that's just creeping in. We're probably going to see
Yeah.
more of this as the season goes on. And I just thought that it was just so clever to just be like, boom, this is what's happening right off the bat.
Yeah, a dynamic familiar to anyone in a long-term relationship. It's like, did your missus give the okay for this before? Yeah, no, yeah, well, I can power hose the house with cement. Yes. Again, his character, and a lot of what made the last season of Game of Thrones so bad is there were so many people making stupid decisions that you're thinking, no, this doesn't make any sense. And although he is, quote unquote, the villain, I don't think there's too many good people in this show. He doesn't do anything where you would turn around and say, oh, like, that you would must know that is a stupid decision to make. And you can see that he's been somewhat undermined by his niece wife, or whatever you want to call her. And it is a rational choice. I want a son for a son. That's, you're looking at it going, yeah, I 100%. That's how he would react in that
Mm.
scenario.
And especially
And I,
because Alicent had wanted an eye for an eye as well.
yeah, because what was it? An eye for a dragon was the last one as well. So I think, a fair trade, a son for a son seems, in this world, about as fair as you can get.
I know. Like when do we ever talk about fairness in Westeros?
Yeah, about as useful as a broken cup, as Ned Stark would say.
Gosh, and actually, I just briefly mentioned Alicent there because, as much as Damon's opening scene was kind of like, oh, okay, this is the note that we're starting off with. Um, Alicent and
Yeah.
the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Um, oh, that was not the opening scene I was expecting for her.
No, she was doing a bit of commanding of her own. And I did like the way that, she had criticized Rhaenyra for this when they were younger. She's like, oh, you've given up to your desires. And then she does the exact same thing with the exact same person, no less, as well. So the hypocrisy of that is going in. And again, I think we're going to see someone else, and Glaries won't be too happy with that. He's not one to accept defeat easily. So yeah, it's just that little instance has so much going on. Like it just looks like, oh, you've been caught in bed with a man. It's like, oh no, that's the man that does the thing, and he's just yeah. I needed a notepad watching this, and especially doing a show like this. I was like, I need to have everything in a row because if you know Game of Thrones and House of Dragons fans, if you say one name wrong or get one thing incorrect, they will burn you at the stake.
They will come at you. You'll
Yeah.
be burnt by dragon fire, and rightfully so.
Which, to be
But
fair, is not the worst death you could get in this world.
yeah, it's actually probably quite merciful. But like what I just thought was quite interesting is that when it's like for it now remind me because here's the thing I keep calling him Crispin but I think it is only Kristen Cole, isn't it?
Yeah, Sir Kristen Cole.
Sir Kristen Cole. I don't know why I keep calling him Crispin. Maybe I've been watching too much Back to the Future and talking about Crispin Glover. But essentially he has gone from being the most noble and honorable man being like no this is the thing I've deflowered Rhaenyra we must run off together and get married like don't marry
Mm.
Laenor but now is kind of just like oh yeah I took an oath of celibacy but I'm gonna go bang the Queen Mother like it's that kind of like juxtaposition for him as well and seeing how his character has evolved even just between seasons is
Mm.
quite drastic so again, I'm sure that's going to be something that we're going to see more as the season progresses. And yeah, I'm not sure if I'm excited to see where it goes
Mm.
or just kind of like curious to see. I think he's probably going to be one of like the big villains that we're all going to love to hate this season. Because last season, of course, it was Damon. Damon was the one that
Mm.
people liked him, but nobody should have liked him, even when he was
Mm.
being like an absolute jerk. Like he murdered his wife so he could try and marry his niece. Like that's not okay. But
It
everyone was
is.
still just like, yeah.
Yeah, I like that Kristen has gone from a man of honor to a man who's on her. You can cut that
Hey,
out. And yeah, like
I'm
Damon,
not.
like you do forget that. Like he had that, those cool fight scenes towards the end of the season, and you're just like, yeah, this guy's a badass. Like he killed his wife to marry his niece. Yeah, this guy is weird. There's no one to root for in this show, and you just kind of like Succession. You just can't look away. Like we kind of said this last season. This is Succession with dragons,
Yeah.
and it is that thing where like there's nobody you are rooting for certain people in it, but there's no one who if you're explaining to someone who watched the show, oh yeah, I'm really rooting for the guy who killed his wife and married his niece.
Yeah, or I'm rooting for the guy who has been an absolute tit throughout the entire first season, who is now sitting on the Iron Throne. Now, in fairness, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that, but if anybody came out of the first episode kind of coming across a little bit half decent, I was surprised that it was Aegon, what was the turn of phrase that his man used? The magnanimous. I can't say that word.
Magnanimous.
Thank you. That word. Like I was really surprised with kind of the new leaf that he seems to have turned because this is him. He's just like, yes, I'm king. I'm going to try and do good and not be the little douchebag that I've been throughout the first season. And like even seeing the way that he is with little Jaehaerys in the meeting, like he doesn't care what anybody else is talking about. He is looking at his son who is tormenting the Lannister, and it's just adorable. Like you see like such pride on his face because he's just like, I've got a little divil on my hands and I was one too. And it's just really cute. And it's like the foreboding, I think, was just really well handled in that sense.
And it was, and that scene you said with the counselor where the child is playing, I was like, oh, this is going to take like a really sinister turn. I know he was about to humiliate him by giving him the jockey back during it, but yeah, it didn't play out how it would. I think it pulled the rug out nicely. Where you think, oh, that's actually kind of a nice moment, and he's like, oh, they've got a good relationship. I can't wait to see how that develops. And then they went, oh no, the rug pulling is coming. Don't worry about that. And even with the when he was meeting the villagers and he's
Mm.
going through and he's like, oh, I just want to keep my sheep. Yeah, yeah, no problem. And then you have Otto Hightower in the background. Well, actually, the dragons need sheep. Okay, you cannot have your sheep anymore. It's like, and then there was the next guy who kind of wants to be paid in advance. I can see that kind of coming back to haunt him at some point. There's all these like foreboding moments in this show where you have to pay attention, and there's so many little red herrings about that's going to play a part in it, and I'm keeping that in the back of the mind, and then nothing will come of it, and then there's this little offhand comment, and that's like I can see that coming back. Something's gonna lead that path. Something's gonna lead that path down.
Well, one thing that I actually noticed was the guy, the blacksmith who came up, I think his name is Hugh or something like
Mm,
that. When they turned around, because like, but you don't really tend to see them walk away, but they really kind of focused on the way that he turned and it showed that he actually had quite long white
mm.
hair.
Oh,
And I was like, I couldn't tell if that was just that it's graying or could he be a Targaryen bastard?
yeah. And I also like the fact you can see cheese in the background with the dog
The
walking
dog
around
walking
it. Yeah.
by!
Oh, the poor dog.
Okay, let's talk about the dog in the room because the internet has gone berserk over the poor dog getting kicked by. Now, I thought it was blood that kicked him, but a lot of people were tweeting that it was cheese that kicked him.
Yeah, it was cheese. I thought it was.
I thought it was blood.
I'll have to go back and watch. I definitely thought it was cheese because I was like, okay, well, you deserve a fate worse than death for what you're doing. And even to go in, like, what was trending is no one seemed to care about, the awful thing that we're about to get into. Everyone's like the dog, and yeah, I can kind of see that. I was like, yeah, no, you kill everyone you want in the kingdom, just leave the dogs alone.
And honestly, credit to the special effects team because honest to God, I've watched that clip a couple of times because I wanted to see, like, is there any hint of, I know, like, he definitely didn't kick the dog because it's so, like, beat perfect. You can't really tell that he didn't actually kick the dog. Like, people were saying on Twitter or X that they were waiting until the very end to see the thing written up on the screen that no,
No
no
dogs were
animals
kicked during that.
no animals were harmed in the making of this because it looks that accurate. So, honest to God, kudos to the VFX team. That was very well done.
I'll give them kudos for that, but I will be taking kudos away from them in a couple of minutes for something else.
Oh, yeah, you will. All right, let's talk about the blood and cheese in the room because this was the moment that we've been building up for. And the minute that I heard that the first episode was titled A Son for a Son, I think anybody who's read the books will know that this is what was coming. And oh boy, I, as much as they did it very smartly and not as gruesomely as it's described in the books, it was still like that sawing noise will haunt
Yeah.
me to the end of my days, I think.
Yeah, that, and as someone who has, a baby on the way in a couple of weeks, that was absolutely traumatizing watching that scene. And I like it, it was played like a horror film, them going into it, because as you know from Game of Thrones and from House of the Dragon, just they're not shy when it comes to, freaking people out with gruesome acts of violence. And you're kind of looking on, oh, they're not going to do what I think they're going to do. Yeah, no, they're doing, oh, good God. And the one thing that took away from the scene, and I said it to you about it, is you see the queen running down the steps, which I think is the steps that what's the name ran down with
Rhaenyra
Joffrey.
has to.
Yeah,
Oh, so yeah, so it's the same steps that Rhaenyra has to do so it's the same walk but in reverse.
yeah,
Actually, that's a really good point. So basically, Alicent made Rhaenyra walk from because Alicent is now in Rhaenyra's old
yeah,
chambers and Helen is in Alicent's old one. So that's the same walk that Rhaenyra had to do with her child, just after giving birth, like dripping blood.
yeah.
She walks up the stairs. So yeah, sorry, continue.
And it looked like the baby from Twilight, so it was kind of cutting up for the close up where you could say it's like, yeah, it's fine. And then she's running down the steps, which is what clearly a mannequin or a doll, and it's flapping all over the place. And it just kind of undercut that scene a little bit for me in the moment. Watching it back the second time, I got the full horror of it, but just it was a bit distracting in the first instance. And like you said, the change from the book is very different. In the book,
Mhm.
it's the two sons, it's Daenerys and the younger brother Mailer, and Blood and Cheese ask her to pick. She picks the younger one, thinking, okay, he's too young to understand what's going on, and the older brother obviously is the heir. And then just to be extra evil, they turn around to the younger son and she wants you dead, and then kill the elder son anyway. So not only did they kill the son, they also have left the son with the knowledge that between the two children, the mother would have picked him to be killed, which is going to lead to all sorts of therapy issues later in life.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the ramifications of that act as well, changing it so in House of the Dragon, it's Daemon has gone to hire them to kill Aemond, and when they can't find him, Cheese stumbles upon Helen and the twins' room, and basically they're like, "Oh, which one's the boy?" And I was actually surprised that she did point to Jaehaerys as quickly as she did, but maybe that was kind of like she thought that whichever one that she'd point at, they'd kill the other
Kill
one.
the other one.
But
which is what they've
Un
done in the book. So maybe that was like a misdirect for people in the book. And then people like me who haven't read the book thinking, is it the boy they've killed? Like I know she said it when she comes into the room with our mother and Kristen Cole.
Timing.
Yeah. Like imagine walking in on your mother, like, in the midst of a moment, and that's the second worst thing that happened to you that day.
Oh my God, yeah. I don't want to picture that. Sorry, Mom.
Yeah, thanks.
But yeah, I think like in terms of what the realm's reaction is going to be, because everyone's going to know that, they were the Targaryens were the blacks were behind it kind of thing. So it's yeah, I'm kind of curious to see how the reaction is going to play out because now at least the blacks have that kind of like we didn't want to kill Jaehaerys. That the assassins just did that off their own bat. We were aiming for Aemond. Um, but yeah, I'm curious to see how it's going to
And
play
even
out
that with
down the
Aemon,
line.
like Aemon, it's played in the show that he killed him by accident. That the dragon kind of look, I'm doing my own thing. Another thing, speaking of dragons that we haven't talked about is when Rhaenyra goes and like she's wants to find her son's body. She finds part of the dragon as well.
Hmm.
Her dragon is the mother of her son's
Viserys is
dragon. Yeah, so the it's like she's mourning her son, and the dragon's in the background mourning her son as well. So
because
that was a nice little.
you could see him in the
Yeah,
background kind of freaking out. So that makes a lot of sense now. I didn't know that.
yeah. Shout out to Twitter. I saw that. I was like, oh, come back, and I was like, yeah, I didn't notice that. Again, so much kind of going on in like little things in the background, like a dragon mourning its son in the background that you don't even realize. Which I
Oh,
know, like you were getting more upset about a dog being kicked and a dragon. So
I know.
are we
What
just
is
terrible people?
No, I think we've just all been desensitized by Game of
Yeah.
Thrones because they did so many heinous things in that franchise. Yeah, we've just become really just like, okay, we kind of know that this bit's going to be awful, but oh my God, they kicked a dog. How
There's
could you
loads
kick
of
a dog?
people. There's very few dragons.
Also very true. Well, look, that's a very brief discussion. We could probably talk about episode one for hours and hours on end, but neither of us have time for that. So, episode two is coming up soon. So, how do you see episode two going, but also the rest of the season? Are there any points that you saw in episode one that you think are going to be kind of like a continuous thread throughout?
I think the fact that they showed the wall, I think that's going to play into it a bit, and they made a point to mention the story about the dragons not wanting to go past that.
Yeah, how did
I
we forget to talk about that moment as well? Because, that Stark boy is going to come into play down the line, I think.
Yeah, Jon Snow's voice twin. I genuinely thought that was Jon Snow at the start when they were doing, and I like well, it's probably kind of done on purpose that there were so many people who looked like the Snows and the Starks in that scene. That can you just see the back of their heads and like, oh, that kind of looks like them. Yeah, I think that's going to play into it. I also think the shipmaster is going to play into it as well. I think they made a point of that. I was like, here's a scene for 30 seconds to kind of show you that this is going on. Here's a dagger. This will in no way play into anything later on, I'm sure. That's going in. But I'm really looking forward. I hope this delivers the kind of the all out war. And I think what the fourth season done really well is it was so cinematic. Like that scene of the dragon flying and there's the flash of lightning and you just see the size of the thing. I want more of that. I want that, spectacle, which is what Game of Thrones was all about, which kind of filtered off towards the end. Holding people who were so obsessed with that fourth series and so obsessed with the books, you have the ball now, run with it.
Yeah, and I personally think that there's two kind of main disagreements that are on the cards ahead for us. So I think there's going to be a showdown between Rhaenyra and Daemon because, and I actually think we saw a clip of it in the trailer as well, where she asks, "Can you like? I know I'm your wife, but can you also respect me as your queen?" I kind of feel like that scene's going to be coming up sooner rather than later. I also kind of see Aegon versus Otto being a big thread throughout this season as well, because clearly the way that Aegon wants to be king is very different to the way that Otto
Yeah.
wants to be king. And because Otto is kind of the one who put him on the throne, he kind of sees a bit of ownership and maybe like he's the one on the throne as opposed to his grandson. So I kind of predict that there's probably going to be a few little disagreements between them. Who knows? Maybe Aegon will be like, no, screw this. I'm going to have my own hand of the king. You were my dad. Because, he is a whingy little
Yeah,
thing
and
most of the
Larry has
time.
kind of alluded to that as well. And there was also the
Mm,
moment where Otto walked in on Eamon kind of having his own little strategy meeting as well that he was left out. So I can see if he feels like, the power he's worked so hard to get slipping through his fingers, he's going to make a move in haste there. And, he could end up picking between one of the two and trying to fortify his hold on one of them.
definitely. Well, look, that is all we have time for today. But thank you so much for joining me for the first episode back. I know we're not in our fancy studio anymore, but
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a makeup team to make me look in any way nice, though, unfortunately. So.
me neither. You can see all my sunburn. And that's all from us for this week. And join us again next week for episode 2 of House of the Dragon.